everyone, and welcome to another ISACA Podcast. My name is Chris McGown. I'm the Principal Information Lead here at ISACA. Joining me today is Rex Johnson and Hamlet Khodaverdian. They co-authored an article titled Improving Cyber Resilience in an Age of Continuous Attacks. Rex, Hamlet, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
So before we dive into the article itself, I was hoping you guys could just give our listeners a little background on yourself.
My name is Rex Johnson. I'm the executive director and I lead the cybersecurity practice for CAI. I've been doing this for, over 25 years now. Have the opportunity to help a number of clients with identifying ways to protect their data and information. Got into this when I was asked as an IT person to look at cybersecurity around 2000 and see if it had any teeth to it. So been here ever since.
Cool. Thanks, Rex. So name is Hamlet. First name, just like the play, Shakespeare, last name Khodaverdian. I am the vice president of the Americas for Elementrix. I'm also a co-founder of the company. Elementrix is basically a multi-vector, holistic, sort of hyper-converged XDR platform wrapped up with a managed service and MDR service around it. It's pretty extensive in sort of the things that we cover. Previous to this, I was a CTO and a CIO at multiple companies, fintech, things of that nature. I've managed large software engineering teams, building large software projects, risk teams where, we're building underlying statistical underwriting algorithms to, for loans, things of that nature. And then obviously security has always been wrapped up in a lot of that and has always typically rolled up to me at some point. So about 20, 25 years of experience in just sort of software engineering, tech, information technology, things of that nature. So.
Nice, thank you. So I know, Rex, you're in Kansas City, right?
That's correct.
And Hamlet, where do you reside at?
I'm in Orange County, California.
Oh, is that anywhere near all the bad weather?
It's very heavy rains here, but not like the crazy stuff that you see in, the Central Coast, Montecito, San Francisco. Yeah.
Well, good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's heavy rain, but no one's car has gone, sideways here. So.
Rex, I see in your background that were you previous military?
Yes, I am. I got into the military in the mid-'80s and used it as a way to pay for college. Wasn't planning to stay as long as I did, but fortunately was able, after my active duty tour, to go in as a reservist. I retired in 2016 after about 32 years of service, and just really had the opportunity to serve my country and see a lot of things in a lot of places. It was a great experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. And at the same time, I'm glad to be done with it and be focused on now one job, because I can tell you as a reservist, I felt like I was working too at one time, and especially with the way things are in the world today.
Thanks. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I can relate because I spent 22 years in the Navy and retired in 2018.
Awesome.
So I know what you mean by lots of jobs and everything else, but the same with college and everything else. I wouldn't be here without it and get all the knowledge I have now. So,
well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Totally, Chris. Thank you for your service.
Thanks. So your guys' co-authoring article, was it difficult to co-author an article? Or you guys work together quite a bit, you mentioned, so.
We both companies work together quite a bit. We have different levels of expertise, different levels of services, sort of combine those and help companies and organizations across basically the US. It doesn't really matter how big they are. And so we've had that partnership for a while. And so co-authoring an article like this, when we were asked for it, it wasn't, at least from my perspective, Rex, it wasn't that hard. We know what we're both good at, really, really good at. And combining that knowledge and creating something that I think is relevant for, organizations out there to read correctly. And it wasn't that hard, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I think reading the article, it's very relevant because I don't think a lot of people have, think like that or think like that. Well, they should, but they think they do. But once you dive into it, you realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not doing everything I should be doing, kind of thing.
There's a lot to do. And so the article is easy to write because Hamlet and I have had a great working relationship for the last few years. The thing is, I serve in more of an advisory role. I come in and I sit down and help organizations figure out what they need to do. But cybersecurity is such a wide field. There's no way you can be the expert at everything. So when we look for solutions such as a managed detection response to protect the endpoints, companies like Elementrix are who we're going to bring in because they provide excellent service and they can prevent a lot of things from happening. You don't want to get to the point where you have a breach, but or if you do, you want to find a way to be able to manage that well. And while there's no silver bullet, which the article talks about, being able to have those layers of and know who to pull in as the expert, depending on where you are in the event of a cyber incident, that's helpful. And Hamlet has been really good at on the preventative side and being able to detect and contain things. And it's been a great ability to talk about what his organization can do to help other companies.
Yeah, I think you touched on some of the talking points I was going to bring up when you mentioned silver bullet. A lot of companies out there, or some companies, even some organizations I've worked for in the past, they thought, I come in with a security background, but I might not have been filling a cybersecurity role. And I would ask that question. I was like, what kind of security you got? And they're like, oh, we got firewalls and passwords. And, I'm like, there's no other layers of defense or other tools that you might use, tools as in, SOC or some kind of continuous monitoring, and I found that quite a few of the smaller businesses or even school districts, to be honest, didn't really have any kind of layered protection. And that really surprised me. Do you see that out in industry?
We do. And, I kind of go back to the old Disney movie Shrek when he was telling the donkey that, ogres are like layers or like onions. They have layers. The same thing is with security because we are in a connected environment. Like, we rely on the internet and that connectivity all the time, especially during the pandemic. We saw that even more so. But there's several ways that things could be compromised, and some of the things that you want to do have to think about all those tiers and all those layers. So it comes down to having an understanding of your environment and knowing what assets to protect more, because not all data is created equally, but also how you're going to shield that. How are you going to have perimeter protection? How are you going to have detection when somebody does come inside? What are you going to do after that happens? What kind of things are you going to do when a breach does happen? There's just so many layers of security that you have to consider about. You want to keep having those up so that there's enough up there that just deters a threat actor because they realize how hard it is to get to the data that and the information they're trying to get to.
Yeah, you'd say probably the path of least resistance is always what, an adversary would want to take, right?
Well, it's like anything else. And we've worked a number of breaches. And one of the things that I see is that when a breach happens, the customer I'm working with wasn't the only one that this group targeted. If you got groups that spin off the Conti group, such as Royal, they're going to go after a number of organizations. They're going to get a foothold there. They're going to dwell in the environment. They're going to try to enumerate. They're going to try to learn about what's going on before they plan their attack. But if they find out that things happen that have disrupted their foothold, they're going to move on to the next one, and they're going to do what's going to get them the payout, because cyber criminals are in this for the money. They're in this is their job. They're very good at it, but they're going to go where they're going to get the most bang for their buck. And if they start hitting walls and it becomes more difficult, it's going to discourage them. They're going to abandon that particular client, so to speak, or that target, and go towards the next one.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of sort of defense in depth, multiple layers, everyone, talks about this. I just don't know if companies understand how to do it correctly. You look at all the major data breaches, Autka, Cloudflare, Home Depot, Target, Capital One Bank, every single one of these, they had all the tools. They had the greatest, we stopped data breaches. They got the network sensors. They've got the multi-million-dollar SOCs. They've got the DLP solutions. They've got, whitelisting capability. Everything's there, right? And then suddenly you see a single person, gets spearphished at Uber, and Uber just had their second data breach that you're well aware of. And this kid, a 17-year-old kid from the UK, just doing it for fun, he basically breached Uber, within, several hours, basically spammed a contractor, got access to multi-factor authentication, which they were using push authentication, got into the network, scanned the network, found a location where his passwords were stored in clear text, used that data to basically access all the critical systems, whether it's just AWS, Okta, everything. So, and we're talking about Uber here. It's not like they've cut corners on cybersecurity. It's not like they've suddenly say, you know what, we're going to cut, $10 million off the budget. This is the same scenario at, all the large firms. So the question needs to be asked, right? Like, what is the point of all these solutions if they can't stop sort of data breaches? And so part of, I think, the thing that we were talking about in that article is that there is a little bit of too much trust being put in the technology itself. The technology itself is important, but it's not a silver bullet. No, there is no silver bullet. It has to be managed correctly. Think of this scenario. You go and you want to buy something from Amazon for your kid's birthday party today. You want to buy gifts, going away gifts. And you look at the reviews and you can immediately tell that this is a fake review, right? You can say, oh, that's a fake review. That's a fake review. That's a fake review. Because, it might be a Chinese made product. And then they say, hey, can you write a fake review? So Amazon today has a very difficult time. At the scale of the size of Amazon, the scale of their engineering, the scale of how big they are, the type of people they have there, they can't filter out fake product reviews. This is a problem they're having. And you're telling me that the cybersecurity vendor that you just listened to with a shiny box has AI who's going to catch a nation state actor with that shiny box. This is where we are in the state of ML and AI. So ML AI is good for very, very specific black and white things that can easily tell. If it's a human generated thing, AI or ML has a very difficult time telling was it a human that did this. So just be weary of vendors sort of pushing what I would say silver bullet solutions. Oh, we would have caught that. Oh, we would have caught that. Maybe, unlikely. It would have most likely been a combination of the person, the security analyst, in addition with that technology. And that's the key. The security analysts, they have to be trained. It's got to be used. You can't just buy a piece of technology and hope that it's going to do magic and then let it be for a year. Someone's got to manage that. You have to have the team. You have to have the expertise. So this is some of the things that we see, that there is no silver bullets out there, and a lot of companies try to do this on their own, which obviously we're a little biased. We think you should always have a partner helping you. That's sort of very specific focus on cybersecurity.
Yeah, thank you. That was very insightful and kind of frightening if you think about it. How many people use Amazon? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've ordered things from Amazon that had very good marks, and I didn't even think about it. And I got it, and I was like, what? What did I order?
Yep.
Well, you also got to think of the fact that how many times have you looked for something online and all of a sudden ads for that or similar products have popped up on your browser? Because everything on the internet is traceable. That sort of information is available to threat actors, and they're able to piece things together. So these phishing emails that you see are very well done. They do their homework. And there's information out there that they could take a look at and even find ways to try to find your Achilles heel and best get in.
Yeah, I'm working on a project in regards to that myself. On another aspect of my job role. And it's crazy to think about, because I worked in a role previously, a red team role, where we had to, generate those phishing emails to send them out and things like that. And it was almost comical how easy you can get people to do things. Just by researching, at the time it was MySpace, researching their likes and everything else. It was really, really easy.
It's in fact the same easiness as it is today. You can have all this defense in depth. Our team can bypass that perimeter spam filter every single time. Every single time. All the perimeter spam filter is just a regular expression matching. It's very easy for us to create customized emails to bypass that. I don't think companies really understand that. I really don't. Like a lot of CISOs and CIOs have a lot of too much trust placed in the perimeter spam filter. Very easy. Every single time we can
just one more we talked about, right? One more tool that you can't just trust in tools. You need more than that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to user training, right? Because you get a spam phishing email and no one wants to hear that word. Oh, don't tell me about user training. I talked to CISOs today and CIOs. Don't tell me about that. I go, but at the end of the day, that's the weakest point. If I can fool your senior network engineer on clicking on something, I can get his username and password. Most likely, he typed in his MFA credential, and he's on a website that looks like it looks like maybe an HR website that he's always accessed. And I just got his MFA credentials as well. I literally just switch over now to Amazon's web services, admin stuff, and I'm in. I'm in literally to the whole network, and it was that easy. There is nothing that you could have done to prevent that other than user training. Or limit VPN access, or limit IP address listings. There's other mitigating things that you could have done. I don't want to say can't, but I could have easily captured your credentials, your MFA. That's not that hard to do. Again, people have this concept of MFA. It would have prevented most breaches. Sure, it would have. Absolutely, it's absolutely required today. But it's not, again, another silver bullet. We can bypass it. It's not that hard.
It's a layer. And one of the things I want to say, so how many of us have been guilty that maybe we've been in meetings and we're clicking through emails and we're not really paying attention to the meeting? Human nature, especially if you get as many emails as maybe I do, I get a lot, and you're trying to get through those. If you accidentally click on something because you're not fully focused, you can let something in. That's another layer of defense you have to think about.
Yeah, so I think that's where the concept, of sort of resiliency and sort of defense in depth comes in. Resiliency. So, okay, a mistake. So if you look at the Uber data breach, a single spear phishing email resulted in the entire enterprise being breached. So you cannot blame that individual that clicked on something. This is a failure of systems. This is a failure of defense in depth. This is a failure of resiliency. This is a failure of the CIO and the CISO not doing things correctly. This is not a failure of that single individual clicking on a single link and resulting in an entire enterprise. That should never happen. A single email resulting in your entire enterprise being breached. This is not his or her fault. This is the top level's fault. This is a CIO, VP of tech. You didn't think about all of sort of the layers correctly, or you have too much trust in tech, or you don't have the right people, et cetera. So that's at least personally my opinion.
No, I agree with you. I read numerous articles and stuff about that breach, and I was quite shocked, to be honest. But to jump back just a little bit, Rex, I believe you said something earlier about cybercrime and what cyber criminals want. Obviously money, right? But the term hacktivism. Can we talk about that for a second? What it is and what it means?
Certainly. So you might have heard the term hacktivism or hacktivist. It's a combination of two words, hacker and activism. So you've got someone while you can argue a hacktivist is a cyber criminal, I'm going to use cyber criminal in the mode of someone who's doing this for monetary gain. They're part of an organization, or they're an individual that's doing this to make money. A hacktivist is someone who is doing this to achieve either a political or a social outcome. Now, they're going to use the same tactics that the hackers are going to use, but they're not necessarily motivated monetarily. And we see a rise in that. So if you think about what's going on right now over on the other side of the world, you've got the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. There are people that have very strong opinions either way in the world. And there are a lot of hacktivists that are out there doing things to try to help the other side, or to get support from people on whatever side they're trying to do. That's an example of hacktivist or hacktivism. You could even consider the group Anonymous as more of a hacktivist group than a criminal organization. They were more of a Robin Hood mentality. They would steal, but they would typically give to charities, which of course is still a crime. But their motivation was not so much financial gain for themselves. So we see that rising a lot, especially during certain elections that may happen worldwide, certain global events, as we just discussed, between Russia and Ukraine, and other matters that are out there. So it's gone up. It's been something that has been pretty much a small amount of activity. It used to be about 1.5% of all breaches and incidents. It's now risen as high as 6% on average, based on what may be going on around the world.
Yeah, it's funny. Every morning I take my kids to the bus stop, and there's a large group of moms, because I'm the only guy there, and they asked me this morning. It was just coincidental, because they always ask me what I do, and I was like, well, I have a podcast today, and it's about this. And they're like, oh, is that because of what happened with the airlines yesterday? And I was like, not exactly, no. Well, did Russia hack us? And I'm like, it's just, news mentions one small thing, and then people run with it. So I'm like, I thought it was a little humorous this morning. I was like, no, that's not really what my podcast is about. But
yeah,
that is
yeah, that does happen. I get the same thing, whenever I go out and somebody asks me what I do, they're all of a sudden, I get hit with a lot of questions, and does it have anything to do with that? And what was your thought on this? And there's a lot of activity. It's because we're connected and we rely on information in the internet. So it is a playground for cyber threat actors, whether they're cyber criminals, hacktivists, whether they're trying to start a misinformation campaign, or even one other area is cyber espionage, where some countries or organizations are trying to get secrets so they can better their products.
Yeah, some of the things I think like organizations should think about is, what is the worst thing that can happen to us as an organization from a technology, cybersecurity perspective. And, when I was a couple of previous roles to this, I was a VP at an insurance company for homes. They would underwrite home insurance. They were the actual underwriter. So you've got, 200, 300, 400,000 policies spread out across 7 states. And so what is the worst thing that could happen to an insurance company? Well, if 40% of your policies are sitting in Southern California and there's a 9.0 earthquake, you could have a significant hit to your financial statements. And then what do you have to do? How do you recover from that? Well, you got to obviously pay all these folks. So you got to go through these very dire scenarios as a company, and it goes kind of goes back to a little bit of threat modeling. If you're making widgets for Raytheon and those widgets go into an F-35, the threat model that you probably are dealing with is an organization or an APT group that's probably trying to get access to the intellectual property. And that's what they're trying to get access to. If you're a standard financial organization, you're doing standard loans, there's no real intellectual property there. You're just doing loans, underwriting. So your financial threat model or your threat model is really someone that wants to do ransomware against you right away and get paid very quickly. And so those are different threat models. They're sort of different threat actors. The Russians are very big on the ransomware stuff. They just want to hit very quick, get paid very, very, very quickly. The whole thing is a business. And then you've got, other types of APTs that are after the intellectual property, which, they don't want the money. They want the actual intellectual property you've been working on for, the last decade or the last 20 years. So it's just something to think about from a organizational perspective. What is your threat model really?
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, once you understand your threat model or whatever, you need to, I don't know the right term to use, but you want to test that you're prepared for it. Like instant response per se, you want to practice like you play, right? You want to make sure that you have plans in place, procedures, models, frameworks, whatever it may be, and then test against those to make sure that you're actually doing what you set out to do in the first place.
And I think that's a very good point to bring up when you talk about incident response plans. And if I could take a step back, that plan needs to be developed based on that threat model. And so, as we talked about in the article, understanding your environment is important because not all data is created equal. You have, I've been doing this a long time, and I remember one large organization. I'm not going to mention their name because everybody knows who they are, but I remember a pen test that we did, and they found there was one of their sites that had easy guessable passwords, and this showed up as a critical vulnerability, and everybody was up in arms. And when we took a look at what that system was for, it was an online system for children's games, for children who are under the age of 6 years old. So easy guessable passwords so they could continue to play their character is something you're going to have. And you also found that particular part of the network and their environment had nothing to do with their operations, their financials. So, a critical vulnerability based on the CVE is not going to be a real critical vulnerability to that. So that's not part of the threat model. But you take a look at things where there's data and financial information or intellectual property. That's the important part. And that's where it's important to understand your environment, to classify those assets are based on data classification, the priority of data. Then on that, you build your incident response plan, because if you break, and I like Hamlet uses an example, is that if somebody breaks into his house, he's not going to care that they decided to grab, a couple cups and glasses, or if they walked away with something like that. He's going to hide his most valuable jewelry or things that he has in a safe that's going to be harder to get to. And the same thing comes around when you put together you look at that threat model and you design your plan. You want to protect the information that's in that safe. You want to protect the information that's important to you.
Yeah, and then if you go back to, and a lot of companies are talking about this. If the worst thing does happen, whatever that worst thing is, how quickly can we recover from that? How resilient are we as an organization? How are the backups? Do you have immutable backups? What is the dollar per minute, dollar per hour that a downtime costs you as a company? And and can you recover, and are you resilient? And that resiliency, everyone talks about this resiliency, but it's really, all that means is like, do you have good backups? So, are the backups immutable, which means that they cannot be encrypted effectively, and they're very fairly available, meaning, it doesn't take you 3 months to restore the data. Because if it takes you 3 months to restore the data, you might as well just pay the ransom at that point. Because there might be a cost benefit analysis there. So that resiliency and building that resiliency, and it's really about, do you have good backups? Are they tested? Are they available very easily? How long does it take to restore that data? Et cetera, et cetera. So.
And that's a very good point. I mean, you talk about how you can get back up, and you were mentioning the incident response plan. Well, the incident response plan needs to have some common things about it, but it needs to have playbooks in it as well, or scenarios. So I think we all remember in high school and growing up, we used to have fire drills. And what would they do during the fire drill? Everybody had to get out of the building because there was a fire. So you would practice very quickly going out and doing that. Well, I grew up in Kansas, and not only did we have fire drills, we had tornado drills. And I can tell you, during a tornado, you don't want to go outside. You want to get to a point of the building where you're away from glass, you're away from windows and doors, and you want to get to a place where you can hunker down and be safe so that nothing's going to hit you. Your response to that threat is different than a fire. The same thing that happens to an organization if they're hit with a ransomware threat, if they're hit with another type of denial of service, if they're hit with some other, maybe even a physical presence or something like that, or if they're hit with, different types of things that are going on, a social engineering campaign or something, based on what happens to them, they need to have a response to each of those things. As Hamlet talked about earlier, what's the worst thing that can happen to you? For some organizations, it's money could be taken, intellectual property could be taken. I have a number of clients that I said to them, what would happen if your business was offline for 24 hours? How much money would you lose? Being off a line is a bigger threat than data exfiltration to them, depending on who they are. And having those scenarios to play out and to rehearse and to practice is what they need to do. Not so much that they stop it, but they mitigate the impact and reduce the amount of time it takes to get back up and operational.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things most companies these days can lose over finances is just the trust factor, because how are you going to make lots of money if no one trusts how you handle business?
It's a really great point, Chris. Really great point, because people assume like, oh, I've got cybersecurity insurance. Well, cybersecurity insurance does not return your data. Cybersecurity insurance does not randomly fix your online status of, hey, you just got breached, and your reputation. It doesn't fix your reputation. Cybersecurity insurance, all it does is help you in the cleanup process. That's all it's doing. So people have this sort of misconception, we've got cybersecurity insurance and we're good. Yeah, you're good. It'll help you in the cleanup process and all that stuff, but they're not going to return your data. Your reputation's shot. There's all kinds of other things that are occurring there that cybersecurity insurance doesn't affect. And if you look at like the Nortel data breach, this goes back a long way. Nortel was a telecom company based out of Canada. So threat actors, most likely Chinese, were in the Nortel network well over 15 years. And I don't know if you guys know about Nortel, but over the last that period of time, they started losing market share. Brand new competitors started popping up in China, producing the same amount of equipment, and obviously at a cheaper price. And so over basically a 12-year period, Nortel went out of business. And all of their intellectual property got sold to a conglomerate of like Microsoft and some other companies. But there are people that have done a deep dive on that and said there is a high likelihood that the fact that the threat actors were in there, a lot of the intellectual property was eventually stolen and rebuilt by other companies in foreign countries, and then basically market share was taken away from them. Literally chipped away at, and eventually over time they were basically their products were not competitive price wise. You can buy cheaper stuff somewhere else, but a lot of it was based on cybersecurity, like just basically like really bad cybersecurity, and their data was basically stolen. Their intellectual property was stolen. So it's something that people forget about. So that can happen. So cybersecurity insurance is not going to fix that. When your intellectual property gets stolen, you're kind of done. No one's replacing that. And now you've got a competitor that has something. Imagine like Siemens that works 20 years to develop an MRI machine, and suddenly the intellectual property gets stolen overnight. So these are the things that I think some companies need to think about.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I just wanted to kind of sum up our great conversation we've had, and then ask one final question that kind of goes in the wrap up. I think all three of us can agree that like cybersecurity in general, no matter how vast it is, really it relies on a specific mindset, right? Like you have to have a cybersecurity mindset. We talked about tools and all these different layers, but if you're not vested and you're not have the cybersecurity mindset or security mindset, I don't think you're going to be very successful. But to go with that, the term neurodiversity. Can you guys talk on that a little bit before we wrap up?
Absolutely. I think it's important to define what neurodiversity is. It refers to the range of differences an individual's brain would function and some of the behavioral traits that may be different from what we call neurotypical. These are folks like people with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, Asperger's syndrome, dyslexia, sometimes anxiety disorders. And what's really amazing, and I found this in my career, is that folks that are neurodiverse, they are very good at cybersecurity. And it's amazing because these same things that we take a look at, we talk about these disorders, or so to speak, that also has another side to it. They have the strong ability to focus. They have very quick learning, ways of learning and memorization, and excellent problem-solving skills. And I've seen a number of people who are neurodiverse, and a lot of neurodivergent people very successful as penetration testers, as data analysts, as digital forensics. In fact, one of the things that CAI does is we have a neurodiverse solutions practice. And I've recently launched a cybersecurity boot camp to bring a number of people that are interested in the field, that fall into that are neurodivergent, and give them the chance to learn some basic skills, and then we can deploy them out to help out clients. And we're finding that people that we deploy out there are working faster than folks who are neurotypical because of these ability to focus in and solve very complex problems very quickly, and having that mindset.
And Rex, CAI has been doing this for like well over a decade now.
Yes.
So this isn't something like, oh, they're just randomly doing to make themselves feel good, look good, and make other companies look like, oh yeah, that's important. They started this like a decade ago when it really, like, they didn't care what anybody thought, and they just thought it was a good idea. And so it's not a facade. It's like a real things that they've been doing well over a decade now. And it's one of the reasons why Elementrix works with them, how we like them, and just how they sort of give back and what they've been doing for the last decade on this. I think even longer. So,
yeah, I mean, as I shared, I've worked with a number of people in this field, and even to make it more personal, I'm the father of twin boys. They're 22 now. They're seniors in college right now, getting ready to graduate. They are neurodivergent, and one of them is going into cybersecurity, and the other one's going into IT. And if you met them, you would think they're very brilliant people. They may seem a little shy, but they've been very successful in school, and they've been given an environment to succeed and be very good at what they're doing. And that's what we're trying to do with NDS, the solutions there. A lot of these folks really haven't had the opportunity to be put in an environment, because unemployment for neurodivergent adults runs as high as 30 to 40%. And we expect about 1 million more young adults with autism spectrum disorder that are going to enter the job market in the next 10 years. But when they're put in an environment that they're comfortable, that they're given the support, and are able to just really focus in on those skills that they're very good at, they are very good at data analysis. They're very good at cybersecurity. And we've had customers come back and say, my God, I didn't believe a person could work this fast. If I could say one more thing, there was an article about a British admiral in the UK who came forward after realizing he had autism spectrum disorder. But he was such a brilliant strategist that he was very successful in his job, and people thought he was just maybe a little standoffish, but he was very good at what he did. And he got to be a 3-star admiral in the British Navy. So there's opportunities for people who are neurodivergent to be successful. They just need to find the right field, the right job. And a lot of them can find that in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most of the operational jobs I had in the past, watch floors, SOC watch floors, whatever it may be, some of my best analysts, malware analysts or whatever it may be, whereas we thought, they're just a shy guy, keeps to himself. But, some people look at people like they think they're weird or whatever, but they don't really understand that they can be just as useful or even more so than the average person doing the job.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a saying that they say that, and in some cases this is true, for every poor performer is a great performer in the wrong job.
That's a very good point.
It takes good leadership to recognize a lot of this. It's really important. It takes really good leadership. So.
Yeah. And like I said, it's, I've seen a lot of them successful when you were giving them I remember one gentleman that I had that fixed a code right there doing an executive meeting because there was a small bug in it. And the executives were all worried, but he dove in there, fixed it, tested it, said, we're good to go. He knew that code so well that he was able to just on the fly go to the right line in it, fix it. That would take another programmer analyst a lot longer time, and they certainly couldn't have done it during a meeting. So that's a real life example that I witnessed.
Well, Rex, Hamlet, we're about out of time. I truly want to thank you for your time. I know you were two busy gentlemen, and I think we had some really good conversation. So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to add one more thing at the very end. Obviously, we just saw the national championship game, the college, with Georgia and TCU, and obviously TCU had a great season, not taking anything away from them. But there was something that Kirby Smart said at the very end after they won that. And he basically said, programs like ours will continue to do well as long as a sense of entitlement doesn't creep into the program. And so when you read that, and it's easy to apply to a football team, but that sense of entitlement can easily be, don't underestimate the opponent. Never underestimate, never trust the technology as much as you think. And I thought that was just sort of a little nexus that I wanted to connect to that because I'm a big college football fan and I appreciate it. I'm not a Georgia fan, but I do appreciate, something that Kirby said. So.
There you go.
Thanks, Hamlet.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you're interested, and I highly suggest you are, in reading the full article, you'll find a link for it in the description of this podcast. But for now, signing out, Chris McGown signing out, and I'll see you next time.